Hello and welcome to this week's edition of IndyCar Weekly. My name is Nathan Brown. I'm your motorsports insider for the Indianapolis Star. We've got a great episode coming up this week, recapping the on and off track events at Road America for IndyCar's fifth consecutive weekend on track. Finally getting a little bit of a break, at least race weekends. We've actually got guys testing on track today at the Milwaukee Mile, hybrid and tire testing going on for the doubleheader weekend that is coming there over Labor Day weekend, end of August, early September. A lot of stuff going on there. I am not at the track, as you can see, but we should have a story up on our website about all of that this evening. But for all our thoughts on Road America, let's get to my co-host, Stefan Wilson. Stefan, we were just talking off pod. I know this was a lot of interesting things that happened in this race, but from a viewing standpoint, I know this wasn't maybe the most exciting race overall, as we tend to see at Road America. What were some of your biggest takeaways watching this race's weekend from home?
Yeah, no, it was, wasn't the most exciting race. The race really got strung out and it really became a three horse race very early. With the incident at turn one, it took out three of the main competitors that were going to challenge the Penske cars. So that changed the dynamic straight away. And then it really became a battle of the Penskes. Pretty much the entire race was focused on those three cars. So it was really the Penske car series. It was interesting to see the battle play out with them, and what an incredible job Josef did coming back from the crash the previous day. I mean, that hit that he took in that qualifying session was so massive. I heard somewhere like 80 G's in the helmet. That's a big hit. And actually, when I watched it, I was like, how is he, I reckon he's going to be concussed. And like, this just, I figured that there could be a chance that he's not ready for Sunday. And then he goes out and drove a great race and looked like he was going to win it for a while. And, just came up short to Will. So it was great to see Will break through, get that win. You could see how much that meant to him. I think that one of the things that really stood out in the post commentary was Hinchcliffe's quote about Will Power saying, "You never know when you've had your last win." And you could tell that maybe Will was starting to think that maybe I've had my last win. And when a driver thinks like that and he's able to break through, it just means that much more. And you could really see that in that victory circle.
So I want to go back to quickly your point about Josef, because I too was wondering. I think it was Bruce Martin of NBC Sports who first had that note Sunday morning that Josef's crash. I think he got from Josef that it was 95 Gs. I think the NBC broadcast said that it was at least 80. So we're somewhere in there. I mean, a massive amount.
And 95 in the car and 80 in the ear.
Okay.
So in the ear senses.
Can you, I know concussions are very different for every single driver and every single incident is different, but can you kind of, as best as you can, contextualize for us just what level of force and how violent of a crash that is that Josef went through? I mean, it literally looked like a speedway oval crash that we witnessed there. I mean, I have to think he was going, 100. I mean, but by the time by impact, at least 150, maybe 160.
Definitely up there. In fact, I actually paused it as it was, slow played it to see if I could, sometimes to show the speed, but I can't remember that right now. But it was basically an oval crash. What I will say is that Road America's done a great job there. I think that is safer barrier on the outside.
And I think it was only just bare, like the portion he hit, I think, was just the start of a safer barrier section there in the kink. I don't know when that was installed. I don't know if that's a very, very new thing, but knowing the force in which he made contact there, if that had been concrete, I mean, we're talking about a very different situation.
Oh, for sure. Because usually what happens there at the kink, right, you lose it, but you lose it very late in the corner, but this was unusual circumstances where he dropped a wheel. He didn't drop it off track. He just dropped it onto onto the wet curb. You're trying to open that corner up as much as possible so you can carry more speed through the corner, make it as open radius as possible. So I get what he was trying to do, and then you drop that wheel, and it's so rare to see a car lose it that early. The only situation that I can remember that was similar was Catherine Legg back in Champ Car days, where she actually
2006, I think.
2006, she lost the rear wing on that straight between the carousel and the kink, and it snapped pretty much at turn in just like this. So when Catherine had her crash there back in 2006, it was just tire walls and concrete, and it ripped the car in two. So it was pretty violent. So I will say, from a safety standpoint, that addition of the safer barrier in these kind of corners, you see it there. You see it also at the final turn of Watkins Glen. It's been a huge it's been a game changer in terms of safety advancements in the road courses in these higher speed corners. And I think, like you said, if it had been just a concrete wall or a tire wall and it had flipped the car around, that concussion would have been. He definitely would have had a concussion. I'm not sure. I'm sure he must have gone through a concussion protocol to get out of that, because usually when you have that high of a G sensor immediately on the car, there's a light that lights up and tells the safety personnel that the car's experienced a high enough G load that the driver could have been concussed. So then that sort of triggers a whole sequence of events. You have to go on this program on a computer and compare your results to a baseline, and that's designed to show up any kind of concussion. So I'm sure he cleared that, but I'm sure he's probably feeling pretty sore on that Sunday. So great drive from him.
Absolutely. I don't know how new this change is. My understanding is that they go through those protocols and then they have to go through it again on Sunday morning. Again, this could be wrong, so don't pin me down on this, but I have some sort of an inkling that some of this changed in the wake of Oliver Askew's situation in late 2020, when he had his big crash at IMS during the 500, and then still was able to race on through, I think it was the I think it was the Worldwide Technology rounds and the rounds at Mid-Ohio. Both of those were double headers. And it was basically after those 4 races, he finally let folks know that he was still battling some weird health issues, headaches, light sensitivity, irritability, things like that. And I don't know this for certain, but I suspect that there was maybe we do that baseline or test of your cognitive abilities against the baseline, like immediately after, or maybe a little while after, but maybe that morning after element is new, because I know we've had some instances where guys have initially been, what I think the phrasing now that they used is seen and released, and it used to be, I think they said cleared and released from the care center. And I think the changing of that, the purpose of it, the way I understand it, is they've been seen, they've been released, but they still have to come back and get cleared essentially the next morning. We saw that with Simon Pagenaud at Mid-Ohio last year. He was initially seemed like he was okay, and then he went back in the morning and they told him that he was not allowed to drive, and he unfortunately hasn't been in the car since. So no doubt that he, they went through the proper protocols. I don't have any reason to think that he wasn't fit, passed all of the tests that they have in place and was deemed fit. But man, that was a violent hit.
Yeah.
Really impressive also that Team Penske basically built an entire car overnight that was able to seemingly take control of the race there on lap 36 when Josef passed his teammate Scott McLaughlin. It really looked like Josef was
In the
had a pretty
captain
good
seat. Yeah.
handle of had a good handle on this race and was going to win it. So props to Team Penske. I know it was folks from all three of those crews went in and did that overnight. Just a points to how impressive that organization is, because there are not many teams in the series that would be able to completely build a car from scratch that would be able to compete for a win hours later after they got that finished up.
100%. That's a good point.
So as you mentioned, Will Power wins this weekend. Not only his first race win of the year, it is a win that gave him control of the points race, 7 races into the 17 race season. It was also his first win in 34 races, dating back to Belle Isle 2022, which again was his only race win in that season where he went on to win the championship. So 34 races. Last year was his first season in 15 or 16 years. Yeah, without a victory. He was kind of alone by himself there with Scott Dixon in going back and forth, seeing who would eventually have that mark. And he, did go winless that last year. A lot of reasons why that took place. I wrote a story coming out of Sunday evening about what he and his wife Liz went through last year. Some of it had been touched on here and there a decent amount, but Will obviously went a little bit deeper. Really appreciate his willingness to open up to us after the race. Essentially noting that Liz nearly died in surgery the off season between that 2022 championship season for Will and 2023. Long story short, she got a staph infection that went into her spinal column, had a fever of 106 degrees and was rushed to the hospital. They did back surgery. She nearly died on the operating table and spent a good while in the hospital. And even afterwards, had multiple 911 calls that Will and his family and Liz's family had to deal with and try to get her back to health. She was, I think, taken to the hospital the week of the season opener last year in 2023, and Will was there alone and was very out of sorts. And all of this bled on even into that Road America round last year, where we all remember him, giving the double birds to Dixon and running up and shaking him after that crash, giving his famous interview where he said Grosjean needed a punch in the face for something that had absolutely nothing to do with the crash that they had. That was a weekend where Liz was actually supposed to travel with Will. She started hallucinating literally as they were about to get in the car to drive to the private plane to fly to Road America. In the end, they discovered that she had mixed up some medications. And she was okay health-wise, and I think was able to be at maybe a couple races the end of that season, and has been back and been a more prominent person supporting Will on his race weekends this year. And it definitely feels like Will is in a much different place.
Yeah,
headspace, on track, off track. He just seems like that calm, nothing's going to phase me, but still supremely competitive guy that we saw in 2022 that was just able to go out and put weekend after weekend together. And the pacing of it, really, when you look at it, it feels very similar to that season. I know last on the pod, we dove a little bit into the championship race, and there was a reason why I felt like Will was still, despite that deficit to those two Chip Ganassi Racing cars of Dixon and Palou, still felt like he was very much in this championship. And what we saw this weekend was exactly why. He's, barring a freaky accident or a mechanical failure, he's so routinely going to be in the hunt. I don't know that he necessarily had the fastest car this weekend at Road America, but he's just always there. And when things align well for him, he's going to take control of the race. And that's exactly what he and his team did there on a masterful overcut move that they set themselves up for that final stint there at the end of the race.
Yeah, it's so funny, because you look back at Will Power's career and the dominance that he experienced in the sort of 2011 to 2016 era. Like, he was so dominant, like qualifying king, just always putting up front in qualifying on pole. I think he has over 50 poles, and that all came
over 70 poles.
Over 70 poles, that's right. And that all came in that sort of span. And yet, really, success-wise in the championship really only started to come later in his career. We're seeing it now, where he's been just more consistent, So it's like his raw speed may have faded a little, but his maturity and the ability to continue to deliver strong finishes, even when you've not got the fastest car, that's what is now sort of giving him these chances of championships, And I think we see that with Dixon all the time, right? He's able to make lemonade out of lemons, and I think Will Power is very much has developed that skill set and being able to pull these results out. So yeah, it sort of does feel like that 2022 season where he's not necessarily been the fastest, not even the fastest Penske car, but it's the fact that he's still 6 foot at Detroit last week when he had several penalties, several pit stops, and he managed to finish 6th, and then getting the win here at Road America really just sets him up nicely for the rest of the year.
Yeah, it's really interesting to look at his his breakdown. I know it's maybe not the best place to do it, but I look at the Wikipedia pages of a lot of these drivers and the way that the results are color coded, really give you an instant sense of kind of how a season went. He had those 3 back-to-back runner-up seasons in the championship immediately after he joined Team Penske full-time, starting in 2010 through 2012. And you see so many wins there, so many poles, but then there's those seasons where, when he just can't afford it, he has a DNF or he has a 16th place finish, or, for example, in 2010, crashes out of the finale at Homestead, finishes second in that championship, finishes 19th at Kentucky in 2011, and what ended up being the season championship there, crashes out in 2012 at Fontana, and what's the championship in the finale. Finally breaks through in 2014. And you look at that year, he has 3 victories, but he also has 4 other podiums. He has a bunch more top 10s. And what he told us after, I think at the finale at Laguna Seca in 2022, he kind of alluded interestingly to a lesson or a secret that he took from Alex Palou, and he really, for whatever reason, did not want to go into it in detail. And he said that he would tell us about it once he decided to retire. But I think
I want to hear about it.
I know. I mean, when you look at that season, it's just, what I can grasp generally is that it just kind of looks like he started to adopt this mentality of, I want to get out of a weekend whatever my car is capable of doing. And I imagine there's some of that when he's a veteran guy. He knows what it takes to win races and championships in this series. But it just, for example, first of all, he didn't have any DNFs in that 2022 season, maybe not taking as many risks, just kind of getting the best out of it that there is to get. And it's really amazing to think that with one win in 2022, he had more points than Josef Newgarden, his Penske teammate, who had 5 wins. He edged, he goes and finishes third at Laguna. Josef finishes second, and was able to beat him by whatever it was, 14 points or 16 points in that championship. And that just goes to show you how important those racking up those podiums, finishing second and not taking too big of a risk to try and finish first. Being able to recover to a 6th place finish like he did 2 weekends ago in Detroit, like over a season, as we've seen with, that's what Dixon has done. Now, obviously he has more wins than Will. He's, been winning at a higher clip. He's also been in the season a little bit, or in the series a little bit longer than Will at this caliber of a team. But Dixon has just become so famous for, at the start of the season, just kind of giving, taking what the car is going to give him. And then as he kind of rolls into form a little bit, can build a little bit of momentum. I mean, we saw it last year. He goes and wins 3 of the last 4 races. That's more so what I feel like we're starting to see. And maybe he won't even win as many races as a Dixon might in a season. I still get the sense that Dixon could rattle off a 3-win or a 4-win season, maybe even 5, if he really finds some short oval form. And I don't know that Will is that same way, but I also feel like I have a higher expectation almost in some way of Will finishing on the podium than maybe a Dixon. And that just goes to show you at 43 years old what he's able to do, and it's making for a really exciting championship with those 3 guys there at the top specifically. So
no, I think I think he's got, out of the 3 Penske cars, he's sort of that all-rounder. I think Josef is clearly dominant on the ovals. He's going to be a threat at the 6 remaining oval races, and then there's McLaughlin, who I think is a bigger threat than Newgarden on the road courses, but definitely lacking in that oval, area. So Will sort of has a nice blend where he can challenge Josef on the ovals, and he can challenge McLaughlin on the road courses. So I won't even say that I trust that Will challenge McLaughlin more on the road courses than Josef. It's just that it just seems, for whatever reason, Newgarden is very hit or miss right now, and on the street courses and the road courses, it's like, he's having that willpower 2011, 2012 situation where it's either he has a 2nd place or win, or he's 26. We saw that last week at Detroit, finishing 26, and those are the reasons why it just sort of makes me question, like, can he string together like a consistent run for the rest of the season? Because that's what it's going to need. He can't afford to have any finishes lower than 10th. I feel like he's set up really nicely to be 67 points back of the lead of the championship, and it's not Palou that's in the lead. It's Will, which I think plays into his favor a little bit. And he's got 6 oval races remaining on the calendar, so it's like it looks like a really good scenario for a Josef Newgarden championship run, but he's still got to navigate Mid-Ohio, Laguna Seca, Toronto, and Portland, and come out of there with no bad finishes that are outside of the top 10. And that's the only question mark. Can he survive those races? And it's not even that he's just going to be off pace and finish down there. It's just like something happens. He gets tangled. He has an incident in the pits. He gets a penalty. All these kind of things. It just seems like these instances happen for him that takes him out of contention. So, yeah, that's the big question mark. Can he maintain form, maintain consistent results through those 4 road courses? And then if he can do that, as long as he has the oval form that he's had the last couple of years, dominated Iowa last year, won both races, I expect that will translate very well to Milwaukee, and then Nashville. It's his home city. Like, you've got to fancy Josef Newgarden for a strong performance there. So, it's even though he's back in 7th place in the championship, he still is probably one of the biggest threats, I think.
I mean, you look at it's such an interesting stat. Like you look at Dixon, Palou, and Power. So we're through 7 points paying weekends so far this season, and between the three of them, they have 4 finishes outside the top 7 this year. So you got 21 race performances between the three of them.
Wow.
And only 4 of them are outside 7th. So like if you're Josef, you know pretty well that the 3 of them are all going to be there in the top 6, 7, oftentimes top 5, all 3 of them, race weekend in and out. And so if you are making up points, not only do you probably have to win like 4 of the 6 ovals, more than likely, that makes up, even if the same driver, let's say Will, for example, even if Will finishes second to Josef in all 4 of those oval wins,
That's 40 points.
Yeah, 40 points, and then you get a point for leading a lap. Maybe Will leads a lap, so maybe that's negated. You've got stuff for pole there, most laps, but at minimum, that means Josef's going to make up 40 of those 67 points. But that still puts him 27 points back for the other 4 races, or the other 6 races that we have on the calendar. Again, 2 of those are ovals, but 4 of them are road and street courses. So if you are Josef, I think almost have to be top 5 in every single race throughout the rest of the year. And that's just not his MO that we've seen. I mean, the reason that he didn't win those championships in 2021 and 22 isn't because he wasn't maybe the best driver out there those seasons. I mean, I'm looking at the stats right now. So in 2021 and 22, Josef wins 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He wins 11 races across those 3 seasons, and he finishes second every single time. And that's because he had so many finishes outside of the top 10, especially even out of the top 15. He's made too many mistakes over, since he won that championship in 2019. 2019, he has 4 wins, but he also has 3 more podiums, and he's got 4 additional top 5s, and then finishes in 7th, 8th. He just hasn't been that same type of, I'm gonna salvage the best I can get out of this weekend type driver. Now, some of that comes to mechanical issues or a bad pit stop here or there, or a strategy call. But even still, I mean, that team isn't at the level where you shouldn't be finishing that often outside the top 7. There's something there that's just been missing that Josef hasn't been able to do, that that Dixon, Palou, and Power have done to win.
I think Josef needs to have a conversation with Palou and find out the secret.
Yeah. I mean, it's
that's whatever that conversation was between Palou and Power. That seems to have really ignited something in Will. So and he thinks it's that important that he's not going to share it. So that if Josef's listening, he needs to be pressuring Alex, like, hey, I'll give you some diapers, the extra diapers, some hand-me-down clothes for the baby, but you gotta tell me the secret. So, like you said, I mean, the only thing I think that plays into Josef's favor here is that it's not Alex Palou that's leading the championship. Okay, and it's not Dixon that's leading the championship. I think those two, they have the ability to go and rack up wins at these road courses. I know that we just came from a road course and Will Power won, but you still have that feeling that, like, if CGR gets it right on a weekend, that Palou is going to be strong at Laguna Seca. He's going to be strong at Portland. Toronto potentially is another track that favors him. So there's Mid-Ohio. So those 4 road courses I think are really favor the Ganassi camp. So at least he's a little closer to Palou than he is, the championship lead. So if it was the other way around, I feel like it would be just a little tougher for him. But I think it's setting up, to be compared to where we were this time last year, just a much more interesting and exciting finale. As we get through to the second half of the season. Last year it was pretty clear there was a runaway, and it's going to be very difficult for that for Alex Palou to be caught last year, and now we've got it wide open where we're talking about someone in 7th place in the championship right now that we think has a really good shot. So
yeah, absolutely. I would go so far as to say, if I'm Ganassi and I'm Palou or Dixon and I don't win at least 3 of those 4 races that aren't on ovals the rest of the calendar, I'm worried about being able to win this championship. I mean, so I wrote about coming out of, I think it was coming out of Detroit, just about how important this stretch of road and street courses was before we get into this oval heavy portion of the rest of the year. You look at last year, granted, I know what Palou did was a bit of an anomaly, but Dixon put on a hell of a performance at the end of the year too. Ganassi as a team last year won Road America. They won Mid-Ohio. They won Laguna. They, I think Palou finished on the podium at Toronto and had an incredibly fast car and had that broken wing issue. They won Portland. So like they have the history, and they've won a lot of those races in recent years as well, between those 2 drivers. So I think you really need to, if you're them, to capitalize on these road and street courses, because yes, you'll probably win 1, maybe even 2 of the 6 ovals through the rest of the year, but I don't know that you can guarantee more than 1. I mean, Dixon won 1 last year. When's the last time that outside the 500 a Ganassi driver had won an oval? I think it might have been Dixon back in 2021 at Texas, if memory serves me right. So I think yes, it'd be great if one of those drivers won all 3 or 4 of those races. I think that helps you better in being able to feel confident. But even if you split them between Palou and Dixon, if they can win at least 3 of those, I think that's really important, because you've got, a Rossi or a Pato that could steal an oval from you in one of these 6. You've certainly got, I'd say,
that's where you almost need that. If you're Ganassi, you almost need Pato to be on form and take a couple of these wins away from Josef Newgarden and Will Power.
But I think you need that, and you also need to really dominate on these road and street courses, because I don't know, unless things have changed so much. I know Iowa got a repave in some places. Milwaukee is a little bit of an unknown. We haven't been to Nashville in a long time as well, along with Milwaukee. They're using, I think, a different configuration, air configuration at Gateway. So things are different than they were last year. But I also think that Chevy has taken some pretty big leaps this offseason. And so if I'm Ganassi, I feel like I need to capitalize on the places that I know I was good last year.
The thing that's scary as well is that, Penske was so strong on those ovals last year. And I know, the aero configuration, the car configuration is different from Indy, the speedway configuration to the short oval, but drag is still drag. And if they found a way to reduce drag and find 2 miles an hour at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, some of that, not all of it, some of it will still translate. So they should still be able to be stronger, even at the short ovals that we go to, just in outright speed of the car. So
they're not going to be
worse.
They're not going to unload and be completely lost. Like, worst case scenario, you got, worst case scenario, Joseph's finishing 3rd or 4th at these ovals, and they're still going to have top 5 cars at bare minimum. They're probably podium cars, and they're probably race winning cars. So that's just why I think these this race upcoming at Laguna is really important, as well as Mid-Ohio for Ganassi. I think if you don't win at least one, if not both of those races, I think I'd be really worried about the championship. And we haven't even talked about the hybrid. That's going to be something that some guys are going to figure out. Some guys are not. But I feel if there were 3 guys in the championship that I feel like are going to just pick something up instantly and roll with it and master it, I think Alex Palou, I think of Scott Dixon, and I think of Will Power. So I don't know that that's going to be a massive shakeup unless there become liability issues, which we'll wait and see.
I would have said Newgarden as well, just based on
probably
he did the he raced the GTP car at Daytona. They've got a little bit of hybrid, so he's not, it's not going to be like totally new
No,
to him.
definitely not.
But like you said, I think Dixon, with his fuel saving capabilities, the extensive background that he's had racing in GTP and Le Mans and Daytona the last couple of years, that's going to pay off as well. So, could see that really play into his favor.
Yeah, let's talk real quick about the start of this race. Again, we're talking so much about Ganassi. Oddly enough, Ganassi had 2 cars in the Fast 6 this weekend. Neither of them were Dixon or Palou. They had a really strong showing from a couple of full season rookies. Marcus Armstrong, who I think was putting on a really great show here last year, running in the top 5, and something happened in his race. He didn't fit. I think it might have been a strategy decision or a bad pit stop. There was something there. He showed out really well here last year. Linus Lundqvist, though, puts it on pole, his first career pole. I think a really important performance from him in that qualifying after what has been a very up and down season for him. He's had 1 podium at Barber, and I think that was maybe his only other top 10 this season. So he was looking like he was going to be on for, at least a podium, or at least a top 5, and gets knocked out of race contention literally seconds after the green flag by none other than Marcus Armstrong. Marcus starting 3rd, passes Colton Herta on the inside just after the start finish line, and that run into turn 1 gets around Colton. Colton actually falls back to 4th there from 2nd. And I didn't get a chance to talk to Marcus after the race, but essentially just got way too close to Linus. I don't know if, maybe he was surprised by the speed Linus was carrying through the corner, or if he just misjudged something. But regardless, runs straight into the back of his own teammate there on lap 1, turn 1. Just an absolute disaster of a start there if you are Chip Ganassi Racing, and Chip Ganassi specifically. Those 2 cars, I think Marcus ends up dropping out of the race for some other either related or non-related mechanical issue, finishes 26th from 3rd. Linus manages to claw his way back from to 12th, but still not the day that you were hoping for. Dixon had a very weird race, finishes 21st, I think, and Palou still manages to finish 4th, as Alex Palou tends to do. But just, I have to wonder what Marcus thought he was getting out of running that close to his teammate there so early in the race. Maybe it's a different story if you're on the last lap, but I still don't even know that it is, because if you're one of these top teams, as important as it is for you to get a win, just as important for the team as a whole is don't take out your teammate. And it just was mind blowing. I wasn't surprised that we saw an incident on lap 1, turn 1. Was very surprised that it was between 2 Chip Ganassi Racing drivers.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of unknown, going towards 2025. The charter system and how that's going to work, and how that can affect car counts in terms of how many cars a team can run. So you get the feeling that these 2 are really sort of pitted against each other. These 2 at Ganassi, they're fighting for their careers, and they're pushing extremely hard to impress and show that in the right machinery they can win races. And I think Marcus maybe just got a little ambitious, clearly, and committed pretty much the cardinal sin, taking out your teammate on lap 1, who was the leader. So it was a double whammy. Like, I would have been if I was Marcus, I would have been very scared to go back to that trailer after the race, because I don't know, Chip just scares me in general. So I can't even imagine what a talking to would have been like from him. But yeah,
I've been on the end of some frustrated Chip Ganassi Racing Ganassi exchanges that I can say that's not a super fun position to be in. And I bet, as angry as Chip has been with me at times, I bet he's a little bit more pissed off at Marcus.
Yeah, Chip likes winners. He does not like his cars crashing, especially not on corner 1 of lap 1. Yeah. So that's like I said, it not only did that. I mean, if you're Chip, you're just like, you're happy that you have two cars in the Fast Six. You're happy you have the pole, but you're also like, it's the wrong two cars. In a way, the two cars that you needed in that Fast Six were Alex and Scott, and you needed them up there to fight for this championship. So, not only did that affect their own two races, it affected Marcus and Linus's races, no doubt, but it also handed the race to Penske on a silver platter, and in the championship battle, like we talked about, it's going to come down to points, a few points that it's going to, ultimately decide this. And, if Chip's two cars make it through that first corner and they go on and they finish 1-2 or 1-3, that it could have potentially taken away 15 to 20 points off of some of these Penske cars that are battling in the championship. So
great point.
I can imagine the repercussions of that. We're going to see play out here. It's going to be important for Marcus to rebound at the next race and just have clean races, and he's going to try and make up for that.
Yeah, I mean, I almost think the biggest part when we're talking about how this changed the the outlook of this race. I looked at the starting grid and I felt like if it wasn't going to be Alex Palou coming back from, let's see, where did he start this race? Alex started he started 7th, so still in a fine position. But I looked at that grid and I thought Colton Herta was my odds-on favorite for winning that race. Amazingly, so I had this pulled up because I wanted to mention it. So Colton has started in, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in 7 starts at Road America in his IndyCar career, he started first, second, 7th, and 11th. He has had such an incredible run, and yet he has had now one single top 4 finish. He's amazingly found out some way, whether it is him, whether it's, his team, whether it's something completely out of his control, like this race was, getting run into behind from Josef Newgarden. He just has such bad luck in being able to turn in an excellent Saturday into a really, really solid Sunday. Last year, it was starting on pole, and then they pitted him one lap too early, and he was having to do a massive fuel save at the end. He dropped back to 5th. I can think of some other examples. Actually, interesting enough, he'd had all of those starts close up front, and he'd still only led laps in a single of those 5. It's still the case now. He's started in the front row in 5 races, and he's only led laps in one of those races, and that was last year before that fuel save mix-up. So that crash happens in front of Colton. As I mentioned, he drops back from 2nd to 4th in the run, to take the green flag. And then he's got these 2 cars that are spinning right in front of him. He obviously slows down. Josef Newgarden, probably unable to see really what's going on, doesn't know why Colton is slowing. These cars are so bunched up, obviously, starting this race 2 by 2 as they do. And Josef, I think, is actually putting the hammer down on the accelerator coming out of the turn, because this all happens kind of on corner exit. And Josef is accelerating as Colton is slowing down, and Josef just runs square in the back of Colton, spins him. Colton was really pissed after the race, felt like Josef deserved a penalty. I don't know if you're race control, if you can give one to Josef there, only because of how close these cars are bunched up. The fact that I can't imagine, Colton's spin was so close to when the spin was happening to the cars in front of him. It's probably a racing incident. And I think some of Colton's frustration too was just how his last 4 race weekends have gone. You start with his team running him out of gas and qualifying at the IMS road course race, and he has to battle from 26th up to, I think, 8th or so. And that includes running into, getting into his teammate Marcus Ericsson and still having to recover from that contact. He crashes out of the 500 from second place. He starts Detroit on pole, has that super weird pit sequence, ends up making a little bit too aggressive move and runs into the tires and finishes down in like 18th or 19th. And then this race where he didn't even really get a chance to battle and gets spun out and manages to claw his way back and finish, I think, 6th. But
still an impressive drive, to get back to 6th.
An incredibly impressive drive. I mean, his ability to do that, the IMOS Road Course race. I mean, that race and this, I think if he was a little bit higher in points this year, if he'd had maybe one win under his belt so far, I mean, those are the types of performances that win you championships when you look back on the season. It's not so much the amount of times that you win, but as we talked about earlier in this podcast, it's about those days where you probably should have finished 15th and you finished 8th, or you should have finished 10th and you finished 6th. But I know Colton was really frustrated.
I don't think it was a penalty. No,
yeah,
there's no malicious intent there, and really, you're not expecting the car ahead of you to brake on the corner exit. Like, you're just not, and you're so close to the rear wing, and the rear wing now is sitting up super high. You've got the aero screen. The visibility out of these cars is just not ideal, especially right there as well. Sort of the road starts to sort of drop away just a little bit, so you're just not in a vantage point to be able to see past that car ahead of you. So when he sees, it's like being on the highway and nobody has brake lights. Like, you're gonna have guys running in the back of each other all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So there was no it's not like it was an incident where I thought that's a penalty. There was a couple of other incidents that I thought should have been a penalty. When Stingray drove Rosenquist off the track at turn 6. I was just like, that's clearly a penalty, but no. And then the one with Linus and Colton, that's like sort of 50-50, but I could have seen that given as a penalty too. But the Josef one, no, I feel like that was a racing incident. Unfortunately, I mean, it doesn't help Colton. It hurts him, and I could see his frustration, believe me, but you've got to also see the other side of the coin, and it's like Josef's expecting you to accelerate out of the corner, and there was no way of being able to see past that and see what was happening ahead of him. So what I will say is, I'm amazed that with the leader and basically this car in second place and then the guy in third place, 3 cars spinning on corner exit of Road America turn 1, and all 27 cars or remaining 24 cars made it through without any big incidents, or could have been. There was a couple that was super close, and that could have been really bad. So we're just glad that that didn't impact the race any more than what it already had.
Yeah, and I kind of think too, like if something like this had happened on a restart where you're single file, and typically the car trailing isn't nearly as close on a restart as it is to the car in front of it on a start. I feel like if something like that had happened on a restart, if say we're single file and Armstrong spins Linus and then Colton's slowing down because these 2 cars in front of him are spinning, and Josef is the amount of space back that you would expect a car to be on a restart like that, and he still spins Colton, I feel like this is maybe a different story.
Yeah.
But it's just,
I mean, everyone is just so jammed in there. I mean, you have to be that close to the car ahead of you because you've got a car next to you or on either side that is trying to get your position. So if you leave a gap, then you're going to lose positions, and you just can't afford to do that right now, and how competitive it is in IndyCar. So I'm pretty, on the side of that should be a penalty. That should be a penalty. Very they need to sort of get driving standards under control. But in that situation, I think that would have been a pretty harsh one.
Agreed.
So I agree with the call.
One more big thing to touch on here before we finish up this week's episode, kind of the elephant in the room. Something that we didn't really touch on in last week's episode because kind of hoping that things were under control. But in case you're an IndyCar fan listening to this pod and have been living under a rock for the last 10 days or so, a quick recap. So Agustin Canapino, Teo Porcher, they crash into each other. Teo misses the breaking point at Detroit. Turn 3 hairpin, sails into the side of Canapino. Both of them continue on. Both of them have reasonably solid finishes, both in the top 12. Canapino, though, was running top 6 at the time, potentially on for his best IndyCar finish of his career. After the race, his fans begin sending, not only in the comment section of Teo's posts on social media, but also in his direct messages, very threatening messages to the level, according to the team, of copious numbers of death threats. We've seen something like this, unfortunately, with 2 incidents last year where Callum Ilott, Canapino's teammate at JHR for the time being that year, when they got into it on the track a couple times, both, by the way, neither of Callum's fault in those instances. Callum dealt with a bunch of hate and some threatening messages in those instances as well. It leads to Canapino issuing a kind of a mixed bag response, I'll say, in short. Have a lot more thoughts on that, but I'll leave it there. Both teams banded together and sent a joint statement out on Monday. Canapino's statement followed on Tuesday that was sent by himself without approval from the team. That leads to Thursday, where Aero McLaren severs its strategic alliance with Juncos Hollinger Racing. And then on Friday, we get to what takes place where JHR officials 90 minutes before practice decide to pull Canapino from the car for the weekend. The reason stated in discussions I had with team officials, not totally matching what was said in the press release, but essentially the reasoning is they didn't feel like Canapino was mentally fit to be in the car that weekend. They felt like he was too absorbed by everything that was taking place online and all of this. The hate that he was getting from fans, I don't know if it was in his DMs or just in the copious number of comments, kind of from the fallout of all of this and just the immensity of the online discourse that was taking place. Really unfortunate stuff, I guess I would say, to say the least. They feel like, midway through the afternoon, right after the autograph session, that he's just not in a place where he should be in the car competing this weekend. Got too much on his mind. So they make the executive decision to put him on a quote unquote leave of absence. And they look to Nolan Siegel, who I think very well might have been the only driver not in the race with a seat with him there that weekend to be able to do it. Connor Daly, who was there later in the weekend, didn't get there until Saturday. I don't know that I saw any other drivers that we think of that are kind of on the sidelines, but still around in a way like you might have some other events. And Nolan is there. He's got his seat in the coin transporter. He's there obviously competing with HMD Motorsports as a championship contender in Indy Next. And right before that Indy Next practice starts, he is told that he's been asked to run in the 78 Chevy that weekend. So he runs part of that practice, actually pulls out 15 minutes or so before the scheduled end of the Indy Next practice, runs down to the JHR garages, gets all set, doesn't get into the seat until 15 minutes into that practice, has a reasonably solid, all things considered, practice. And then we find out the next morning that Nolan, who at that moment is sitting third in the championship in Indy Next, 44 points behind championship leader Jacob Abel, decides to back out of that race. And why that puts us here today, where, as I wrote this morning, I have an inkling that I think Nolan is going to be in that car for the rest of the year is this. He spoke to a couple reporters, including myself, on Friday morning, reiterated how important this Indy Next championship was to him, and that though he would love to compete in more IndyCar races this year, he felt like he wasn't going to do anything that would sacrifice his chance at fighting for that Indy Next championship. And now essentially pulls out, gives up an opportunity at as many as 54 points if he had, taken the pole, led the most laps, and won the race. Obviously, we see Jamie Chadwick have an incredible performance and dominates that race weekend from start to finish. But at worst, we were talking on off pod earlier, Nolan Siegel, who won this race as an Indy Next rookie last year, finishes fourth and takes home 32 points, loses 3 points to Jacob Abel. And the questions start to flood in when you see him make a choice that now leaves him nearly 80 points out of that championship with somewhere around 8 or so races to go. I had 5 different people from, 4 of them from different IndyCar teams, one of them a driver manager, all say the exact same thing to me when I asked them about the situation Saturday and Sunday. They said, I don't have any inside information, but you don't make that decision unless you are either hoping to or already have some plans in motion to be running that race the rest of the year. We don't have doubts that Nolan's going to be in IndyCar next year. His father, Mark Siegel, is very well off. He's got a very successful career as a venture capitalist. But at the same time, I just don't know that you give up on that chance to realistically compete for that championship like he did, unless there's something going on behind the scenes here. What did you think when you heard of that news?
Yeah, no, immediately, I know how much as a driver, when you're competing in Indy Lights, Indy Next, I remember going back in the days, like it's so important. You're really focused on it, because you win that championship and it really seals that, hey, you belong in that next level in IndyCar. So when I saw that on that news on Saturday that he was withdrawing from the race at Road America, that to me tells me, I don't have any inside information here, but I would say absolutely he's done with the Indy Lights. He's not coming back, and he's going to probably be in that 78 the rest of the year, because there's just no way that you sacrifice a whole race weekend like that, and the points. Now he's given himself a points deficit that is just not remotely close to being able to make that up over the remaining races. So to me, I agree. I think you're going to see Nolan in that 78 the rest of the year, and I'm sure the conversation is now sort of moving beyond that and moving towards next year as well, seeing him back in that car for the future. So I feel really bad for Agustin. I actually feel like he got, he was having a really solid year, got a bit of a raw deal based on, the Indy 500, the way that went down for him. I think he was going to be in the Fast 12. I think he had it at the time when he had the plenum issue, which a lot of Chevys had that day. He was like tracking for like P7, P8 or something like that.
Yeah.
So he was having a really strong event. The plenum issue happens, puts him back in like the mid-20s, where and then from there on it was sort of a snowball effect. Then what happens in Detroit? He's having his best race ever, I think, on a road course in IndyCar. Running up front, running strong. Then the issue on track happens, and then so it just feels like it's really snowballed. And I agree. I think he could have handled the situation a little bit better, saying nothing is perfectly okay. There was a couple of likes or something like that. But, part of me is like, this is, his fan base. It's not necessarily him. It's not like he's making the death threats. So for him to get so much hate as well is kind of a bit hypocritical, that we're upset that one driver gets hate, but then another driver is getting hate too. So, I mean, like I've been on that receiving end. I mean, I remember in 2021, after the 500, when my front brakes literally failed, crash out in pit lane, and I had hundreds. I'm not going to say thousands because it was but there was close to. I'm sure there was close to 1,000 mentions and DMs. None were sort of life-threatening or death threats, but just hate,
harassing, hate,
hate,
demeaning.
yeah, just nasty. And you're already having like a really shitty day. Like, your Indy 500 that you've worked so hard to be in just ended way earlier than you wanted it to. You're having a terrible day. You're worried about sponsors, teams, all this other stuff going on that's important. And then you open up. So I didn't even think about it. I opened up social media and I was like, what the hell? Like I could see, when you see plus 99 or whatever on the notifications, and you're just like, what is going on? Didn't even think how, people outside on their couches would view the incident and be upset at me for it affecting other people's races. It was really disheartening, and like I can tell you how much that affects you, but I'm surprised. Like it wouldn't have stopped me from getting in a car the following weekend, put it that way. So I'm really surprised that it did in this instance, and makes me wonder what's going on behind closed doors at Juncos Hollinger Racing. I think that it might be just there's two parties at Juncos Hollinger, and maybe one party is now wanting to go a different direction. So that could be the ultimate reason of what's going on. And I think people on social media, like, just gotta be kinder. Like, there's no need, like, when you're writing that nasty message or nasty tweet that you think is gonna be funny or it's gonna make you feel better, like, there's real people on the other end of that. And even though, like I said, Agustin could have handled things maybe better, I've seen a level of hate that's been directed at him as well as a driver, and that's still a human being. So I think we all just need to do better, So
Absolutely. I have a couple quick thoughts there on that. I think there are societal and even generational differences that we're dealing with here that are really tough to get into. The society and the way people interact in Argentina, from what I gathered from Ricardo talking about all this last year and the two instances with Callum. They just have such a rabid sporting culture there that the things that folks are comfortable saying online, or just that are normal, that athletes just kind of deal with on a regular basis there, is maybe just, I don't know how different it is, because I know folks talk about how terrible DMs are, if you're a professional athlete that's got a lot of popularity. And Augustine is a really big deal in that place. But I think where some of the disconnect happened here is that there hasn't, and I'm not pinning this on either side, but I think generally speaking, maybe where Augustine went wrong is that there maybe wasn't as much of a realization of, yes, I don't see these things as being hurtful, I brush them off, but I just maybe wish, and I think others have wished, that he would have understood why someone might have been hurt by them. There was then also the insinuation that he basically said he didn't think these death threats existed because he hadn't seen them. I don't think Aaron McLaren and Teo Porcher had any need to show him or Juncos what these messages said. I think you kind of, in this situation, you have to just trust that someone is being honest. I don't know that anyone over at Aaron McLaren is going to be deceitful purposefully enough to try and pin this. I mean, as we've said, these teams had a commercial relationship that was important to both sides. Aaron McLaren is not, there's no reason why they would purposefully do something that's going to ruin or make this relationship any tougher, any difficult, or give them any reason to cancel it. So that was one of the things that I think I and others took issue with Augustine's response, And then just kind of saying like, I deal with this every day, kind of implying, why don't you just deal with it? I just wish there had been some more understanding there. And I think that this could have been dealt with very differently. I think that's, again, I know that there's some folks that have said, there are some things that, get translated that are, if you say in this culture, maybe it doesn't mean the same thing as translating it and then saying those words in our culture. And I think there's some value to that as well. But I think generally speaking, where things got off the rails is that statement on Tuesday, which he, by the way, issued against the team's suggestion. They didn't want him saying or doing anything on social media. They wanted him to let the team handle it, and he felt like he needed to say it. And that's where he initially drew the ire of team officials there. And then what he said, I think, was frustrating, and that it seemed both supportive and not at the same time. And then obviously I don't know what he received or dealt with over the next 72 hours, but it does seem like he both dealt with a lot of blowback, which is terrible. He had to deal with, just like it's terrible that Teo had to deal with it. But I think he's dealing with uniquely, the support of, an entire country and along with just his fan base, because he's such a big deal in Argentina. And I can imagine the weight that he's feeling there. And I think it just kind of bogged him down. I know I can I can blow an hour or two really easily just scrolling on my phone. I know how addictive that can get. And so I can only imagine when you're feeling this much pressure and you're getting this influx of all of these messages and stories and things said about you online, how that could maybe be a little bit overbearing. But he talked about how he'd been able to blow those things off before. And I think the team essentially got to a point where they felt like he both maybe wasn't totally understanding their side of the situation, and also just was so wholly absorbed by all of this that they felt like they had no choice but to pull him out of the car. And that gets us to where we are now. I had someone who I talked to say, I think it explains the situation really well, where I don't think Agustin deserves to not be in the seat anymore the rest of the year. I know there are some folks that are frustrated with the story that I wrote this morning, but I'm telling you what I'm hearing on the ground. And what I'm hearing is he gave the team a reason to pull him out of the seat, and how they felt like he dealt with this situation. You can agree with Agustin, you can disagree, but in the end, he's an employee of this team, and his employer decided to take him out of the seat. And when you're not in a seat anymore, you always worry about what that could mean going forward. I don't think there was any situation where this team was considering pulling Agustin out of the car and not letting him finish this season a week ago. But now he's not in the car, and Nolan is the person that they put in. Nolan has money. Nolan is a bright young driver that has a great future ahead of him. I'll mention quickly, this is a team that I think is in need of funding. There's I don't know a whole lot of specifics. You referenced it, but there's some unhappiness behind the scenes as to how things are going with Brett Hollinger and his position as one of the major financial backers of this team. And I think an influx of funding and a bright young driver that they could have some runway with, I think is going to be a really tough thing for this team to turn down. And that then puts in turmoil, what Brad wants for this team might be different from what Ricardo wants for this team. And so what we see happen over this next week, we won't hear probably much behind the scenes until we get an official announcement on who's going to be in that car heading into Laguna Seca, probably in a week or so.
It's an interesting dynamic, one that's going to be really need to pay a lot of close attention to, because, from a joy factor and joy standpoint, you've got to think that Ricardo really enjoyed the fact that he was giving this opportunity to Agustin, and
Absolutely.
It was, like it meant something to him. And now that seems like, I don't think it was, I would bet that it probably was not Ricardo's choice of what happened. So
you'll notice it was Brad's name in the press release and not Ricardo's name. I'll just say that.
So you're like, there's got to be some friction there behind the scenes. So, just an unfortunate really situation. It's all played out, and it's never nice when something like this, like off track, has had the consequences that it's had. Like, as serious as it was also a bunch of silliness at the same time. You know what I mean? Like,
it was something avoidable. It was
totally avoidable, and the consequences have been pretty serious. So
yeah. We'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Thanks for everyone for listening to this latest edition of IndyCar Weekly. We'll be back with our next episode here in a couple weeks, wrapping up what takes place at Laguna Seca in Monterey. It'll be our last race before the debut of IndyCar's hybrid system that will happen at Mid-Ohio in July. A lot, as we mentioned, going on behind the scenes between TV deal, silly season, what's going to happen here at JHR. I will be covering all of that here on IndyStar.com over this next week or so. Hope you will head there and look for some updates on all of that shortly. And then we'll break it all down here in our next episode here on IndyCar Weekly. I'm Nathan Brown. Thanks for listening to this latest episode, and we'll catch you all guys in a couple weeks.